when you're tying, constructing a nymph, there is a rule that shall never be broken. The rule is there are no rules and you're free to express your artistic feelings, as long as they are serving the purpose of catching a fish or fulfilling your ego of being a great tyer. That said, there are almost no limitations, no limits, and only imagination can prevent you from doing something. Nymph is a subsurface fly. Think of, let's say, Frank Sawyer's pheasant tail, or perhaps some very heavy and compact Yavi or Javi bead nymph. When you're tying a nymph, it's like building blocks. You're adding some elements and you want those elements to have certain purpose. Those elements should serve purpose of catching fish or making your presentation better to catch a fish again. When tying a fly, obviously you can't tie a fly without a hook. It may be some heavy-duty wire hook that's meant for nymphs or wet flies. It may be something like jig hook. No matter the hook you choose, the point of your hook is to hook a fish, obviously. And sometimes those hooks have different purposes. For example, if you want to tie a perdigon, you may choose a dry fly hook because it will have less resistance, and for competitive anglers, the dry fly hook penetrates more easily as opposed to something that has thicker wire like this one. You can also choose the different shapes of hooks. Maybe you want to, for example, imitate stoneflies. You want something with a longer shank. That's also possible. Usually when you're choosing hooks for nymphs, because there is a lot of contact with bottom, you may want to choose something with heavier wire or something with bend to accommodate the slotted bead or something, so you can invert your hook so it can ride point up and snag less on the bottom. So whatever you do, have some purpose in mind why you do it. There should be a goal when you tie a nymph. Perhaps one of the not so important elements of your fly may be the thread, maybe, but it depends. The color is probably the least important, but the properties of the thread, whether it's nylon, whether it's GSP or something else, or silk, for example, you may want to choose thread as a basic material for your fly. So you may make a thread fly or perdigon that's just made with thread. Maybe you want something flat so you can split it and insert dubbing inside, and so on and so on. There are different kinds of threads. I won't go in depth now, but you can use different threads for, again, different applications. It's up to you what you're going to choose. And probably most important of all aspects, along with the size of the fly, is the weight of the fly. Size and weight, along with tippet diameter and length, is something that will allow you to go deep or go shallow, whatever you need for the moment. But usually people tend to go deeper and deeper and deeper, so you want something that's heavy, so that's tungsten. There are different shapes: classic shape, slotted shape, jig-off shape. Something that I just mentioned and showed you is Javi bead. That's like super compact, super heavy. It's for some extreme situations. So weight is getting your fly to the fish, so don't neglect it. Weight and the size. There are instances when you don't want to add too much weight, such as, for example, this Frank Sawyer's nymph. There is almost no weight to it. There is a heavier hook. There is a little bit of copper wire. You may add some lead wire as well. It depends where you want to fish it. For example, there are some chalk streams that are shallow, slow, so you don't want something heavy to just go down the bottom immediately and then grab everything that's going along it. Sometimes you want something slim, something thin, that sinks very fast in the water. In that matter, there is a classic perdigon here with dry fly hook, slotted bead, nice tapered body that will sink instantly when it's paired with thin tippets. Now let's get into materials. For materials, you can virtually use anything except materials that defy purpose of your nymphs. That means going down, so you won't be using foam or something that's extremely buoyant to make your fly. You want your fly to go down with more or less speed. In Gordon's book, Feather Mechanic, there is something called form follows function, and it's very important to follow that rule. It's the only rule basically that you have in fly tying, and that, for example, it's super illustrative on perdigons. They are like stripped off any details. So you have body that's completely smooth. It just sinks through the water because it's designed to do so. Again, let's go back to Frank Sawyer's nymph. It's for chalk streams. It sinks slowly. It doesn't go to the bottom immediately. So there is a form and there is a function. They are connected. Materials, you can use anything, whether it's pheasant tail, whether it is tinsel, or maybe some dubbing, or maybe some nice flat thread in copper color, whatever. You can use anything basically, and your flies will catch fish, that's for sure. But combine those materials in a clever way so they serve you and serve your fly. Now, every fly has its elements. One of the first elements you get on the fly, and one of the first that we will tie, usually is the tail. And tail is arguably the least important of them all, because it's almost invisible. Unless you take a bunch of tails. Let me just demonstrate that for you for a second. Imagine tying a fly that looks like this. So I intentionally tied a fly to demonstrate that a tail, regardless of how unimportant it may be, sometimes it may be very important. In this case, the tail is too long, too thick, there's too much materials going on here, so this fly may appear to the fish much bigger than you actually want it to be. So instead of being like this long, your fly will literally double its size just because of the tail. That's my opinion, but I think fish would agree. Next element that we have is abdomen of the fly, and it goes from the tail to the thorax. So this body of the fly is called abdomen. So it replicates body of the fly that we are imitating, or attractor that we want to make. So it should have the shape or silhouette of that fly that you want to make. So if it's a, let's say, rather chubby fly, like some, let's say, caddis pupa, you may want to tie it up a little bit bulkier. But if it's something like Betty's nymph, you want it a little bit slimmer, if you want to imitate, if it's not a tractor nymph. It can be smooth, it can be spiky if you use dubbing, obviously, but it's all up to you. Ribs are there usually for for protection, number one, but also to give some shine to your fly, to maybe give some contrast. If I used white wire over here or tan wire, it would contrast beautifully to this fly, and it would add more segmentation to it, I think. I started with thorax. Thorax is spiky, usually it's legs. You may add a CDC for movement if you want, and usually it's 1/3 of the body of the hook shank here. Next spot is, well, hot spot. Orange, chartreuse, pink, name it, it can be a hot spot. If it stands out from the rest of your fly, it's definitely kind of a hot spot. You may want or you may not want to add it. It can attract the fish, it can put off the fish. Same as flash. You may use flash for your fly. If you use too much, it may actually scare the fish away. If you use just right amount, it may actually benefit your fly. Now that I went into those, let's call them spices, like flash, let me add another spice to it. It just makes your fly a little bit more beautiful. I wouldn't say it would make the fly more functional, but it definitely sometimes serves a purpose of making you more confident about your fly. So let's say the wing case cover. It adds a little bit of realism. For some people it may be important, for some people not. Instead of wing case cover that's natural, like here, made out of pheasant tail barbs, you may want to use some fleshy material, like something like this maybe. But again, let me repeat, don't go overboard with it. Fleshy materials, as much as they can attract the fish, they can actually put off the fish, which is not very good. Out of all spices, legs on the fly are probably by far my favorite ones. And among those favorite ones, CDC is the top of them. Primarily because it just, as you can see, it just gives life. It never puts off the fish. It's always there. It's like a salt. You can always add it, and you're going to be sure that it will benefit your fly. Apart from the CDC, you can use partridge. It gives very nice look to it, almost segmented, a segmented look of those legs. It also moves well in the water, not as well as CDC though, but it looks great. As you've seen just earlier a little bit, you can add this pheasant tail. Pheasant tail is amazing always. There are many legs that you can add, and it's up to you what you will use. You can use maybe some guard hairs. That's also possible. You can use rooster hackle. And there is a top tip here. When you are fishing in wind, if you have over hackled fly with rooster feather, you may use it as an anchor because it will give more resistance in the water when you sink it down, and it will resist the wind from pulling your flies out, especially if you're using more than one fly.
Nice fish.
So let's start with a hook, jig hook in this case, because I want to invert the hook when I'm fishing it, so it will ride the hook point up. And to emphasize everything, I will use and kind of balance it, I will use jig off bead here, and I'll put it towards the eye to extend as much as possible. Here I'm using 2.8 on size 16 hook, and it's kind of undersized for my usual fishing, but for more delicate presentations this is going to be great. I will use some copper wire to reinforce everything a bit. I will use some chartreuse thread. I don't have any yarn in chartreuse, so I'll just cut. I have this thick stream thread, so I cut a couple of strands of it, and I'll see how many I need, but I think this is going to be more than enough. Let's start with thread, which is GSP in 30 denier. Okay, and I'll cover the hook GSP just to kind of increase friction. So the more GSP you cover your hook, the better it gets. Because this is 30 denier, I can allow myself to have a little bit of bulk with something a bit thicker. You'll need to be careful how you use your wraps. So just cut these to even the tips up. Counter spin the bobbin holder so the thread jumps into your finger, so you don't have any difficulties catching the thread here, the chartreuse one I mean. And then you can keep everything on the top, and by this time I can also add the wire as usual. I'm paying attention to which side I'm placing the wire, and because I don't want to again mess up with those tails, that's too much pressure here. I don't want to mess up the tails, so I'll keep the wire on the far side because my first trap will go away from the tail, from the tag, green tag, and this green tag is going to imitate, well, at least I think so, larval sticking out of the shell case. So Granum caddis were very abundant where I was fishing this nymph, and it just proved as a good pattern. So I'm using squirrel dubbing to imitate the shell, because it kind of blends in with most bottoms you can find. Now I'm using as tight wraps as I can Now here you may choose to use same like taper everything up, or you can just keep it to the same thickness. It's up to you. And as you can see, I didn't do anything with this bead. I just pressed up the materials against it as much as I could. So to prevent the bead from spinning around the hook, I'll add a little bit more, and I'll jam it by pressing it down the bead. And now the bead is much more firmly placed here. I'll just take the wire away. Okay. Now, this wire is here just to kind of reinforce everything. It's thin, almost invisible, but it kind of reinforces everything. And okay, at least it broke not so close, so I can actually end up finishing the fly properly. It's a bit thin. Okay, now it's good. It's better suited for dry flies, but I'm using it for this because I don't want to emphasize the wire. I want to emphasize the camouflaged body, more or less. This is one. We'll finish. Now, if I want, I can just kind of add a little bit more squirrel dubbing fur here, and I can make another whip finish knot. When you are using dubbing and making a whip finishing knot, you should use as sparse as possible, because otherwise it won't hold. Thick dubbing will just make a very bad knot. Okay, and now this looks okay. I'm gonna cut this relatively short. That's it. I have finished nymph. It's basically a squirrel or hare's ear. Both of those would work. You may choose to kind of brush it out a little bit if you want. Some of you may notice that I got another brush. It was a gift. So it's kind of comb and a little brush, and the brush is quite gentle, so I'm loving it for smaller and more delicate flies. That's it. Nothing much to it, but it catches fish like crazy. It got me some nice fish during my trip to Harbin, and yeah, that's it. Kind of a magical fly on this trip. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, keep safe and tight lines.